joint. Now the movement, you can actually flex the arm at the elbow joint, and also the elbow joint can allow what is known as extension. So basically you can bend the arm, that is what is known as flex, and of course you can extend the arm, that is what is known as extension. Now in order for those movements to take place, there are some muscles that definitely need to be working together. And of course, the two muscles, they are known as the bicep and the tricep. So as for you extending the arm at the elbow joint, it is the tricep that actually help to do that. Just bring up the diagram so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so here you're actually seeing some diagrams showing what basically happen at the elbow joint in terms of movement. So I'm looking at this one to the extreme left. Now the top one here, we are seeing the cursor right there. This individual is actually bending the arm at the elbow joint there. Or if you want to use a term that is called flexion, no problem. Right, and down below you're actually seeing extension, so the arm is actually extending at the elbow joint there. So definitely in order for the arm to extend at the elbow joint there, the muscle that is responsible for it is actually the triceps. So in order for it to bend, it is a bicep, so that is the bicep at the top there, and down the bottom here you have the tricep around the back. So in terms of movement happening at our movement taking place at the elbow joint, two muscles are responsible for that, the bicep and definitely the tricep. Those are the two muscles that allow movement to take place at the elbow joint. So here you're seeing flex, otherwise known as bend. So instead of saying flex, you can also say bend. So two muscles work antagonistically to flex and extend. So that is at the elbow joint. So what we mean by antagonistic muscle contraction, this is whenever two muscles are actually working in pair. So they are actually working together, where when one muscle contract, the other one will relax. So in order for you to allow flexion at the elbow joint, then that simply means that the elbow joint is going to bend. Now in terms of it being able to bend, it will bend simple because the bicep will actually contract at that particular moment. So once the bicep contract, then the tricep now will actually relax. So they actually work together. So while one is contracting, the other one is basically relaxing. So the second pointer is saying that the bicep muscles, or the bicep muscle and the humerus contract to pull the ulna and the radius closer. So the ulna and the radius are two bones that are located in the lower arms. Gonna bring up the diagram so you can see those two bones. All right, so this is the diagram of the arm. So the lower arm, so this bone there between the elbow and the shoulder, that one is the one that is called the humerus. And here we have the two bones. So we have the radius and the ulna. So the radius is the top one there, and then we have the ulna down the bottom. So these are the two bones of the lower arm, and this is the one bone of the upper arm. Alright, so let's go back to the PowerPoint and see what they are saying in terms of pointer 3. So as for pointer 3, the triceps relaxes at this time. So basically pointer number 1 is saying, or pointer 2 is saying that the bicep will contract to actually pull the ulna and the radius closer to the humerus. So while the biceps, while it is contracting, then at that same moment the tricep is relaxing. So that is the only way movement will be able to take place. As if both muscles are, both the bicep and the tricep, if both of them are contracting at the same time, then that simply means that you will have no movement, because they're basically pulling in opposite direction at the same time. So the bicep is joined to the radius by a single tendon of insertion. So in terms of muscle attaching to bone, it is tendons that basically do that. So that's what that pointer is telling you, exactly where the muscle is actually joined. At the other end, two tendons of origin are joined to the scapula. So that is the upper section of it, right? So in the upper section, let's bring across a diagram so you can actually see that. All right, so the upper section, so that's the upper section there. So it is actually joined to the scapula right there, because the muscles need to attach to bones, or attach to two different bones in order to allow movement. All right, so extension now. So this is now you straightening the arm at the elbow joint. So as for the extension, this time the bicep will definitely relax. Right, the bicep will relax at this time, and definitely the tricep. Right, so the tricep now is what will actually is what will be contracting to allow that movement to take place. So extension, are you straightening the arm on the elbow joint there? So if you look at the tricep around the back of the hand, you will realize that it actually bulge up. And it's simply because it would have get shorter in terms of length. And once it gets shorter, then that simply means that it is contracting. So the fact that it is contracting, what it is doing now, it is pulling the ulna and the radius away from the humerus. That is definitely what is happening there, pulling it away. So the pointers they are saying that the tricep at the back of the humerus will contract. Right, so definitely that is what will be taking place, because that's the only way you can allow the arm to be extended at the elbow joint. Then they are saying that this draws the ulna nearer to the scapula and extend the arm. So it actually straighten the arm. That basically what happened there. Alright, so the bicep at that particular moment would basically in a relaxation mode, simply because the bicep only contract whenever you're bending or flexing the arm at the elbow joint. So it have 1 point of insertion for the tricep, and that is on the ulna. The tricep have 3 points of origin, so that is up between the scapula and the humerus. 2 on the upper part of the humerus and 1 on the scapula. All right, so moving down to what to another concept. So joint. So in the skeletal system, we have different types of joints. Now, as for the different types of joints, it all depend on how the bones are arranged. That's how it depends. It depends on how the bones are arranged. So first, we have to know um, what is a joint. So a joint is normally formed whenever two or more different bones meet. So for example, at the elbow there, we have three bones joined at the elbow: the humerus, and of course we have the ulna, and definitely the radius. So those are three bones that form the elbow joint. The knee joint is the same thing. Three. You'll actually have three bones there. The upper one, which is the femur, then you have the fibula and the tibula as the lower ones. So at different places in the human body, actually have different joints being formed. So again, the definition for joints: this is a place where two or more different bones meet. Movement occurs in many direction planes, and to make this possible, the bones must be joined to each other. Good morning, in different ways. Alright, so as for type of joint, definitely we have more than one type of joint. So the two main categories are fixed joints and synovial joints. Synovial joints are also called movable joints. So as for the fixed joint, there is only one type of fixed joint, and I mean the joint is just fixed. So why they call this type of joint fixed joint is simply because this joint does not allow any movement. So in the skull, for example, the skull is made up of different bones. So it is not just one bone that make up the skull, and those bones, they actually join to each other. They actually join to each other, and in terms of them joining together, that's why they are known as fixed joints, and that simply means that these bones, they don't allow any movement between them. So are formed where bones are not meant to move. So that's where you will have a fixed joint. So in the brain, for example, the skull, which should protect the brain, for example, because the brain is so sensitive, then the human body don't have the tendency of to be moving a whole lot. Second pointer, the sutures. So that's the name of the joints in the skull. The sutures of the skull is made up of several bones which fuse together in the early years of life. So fuse meaning that they are tightly packed. So definitely those joints, they are firm, they are rigid. This is important, it's very important, so that the skull provides strong protection for the brain. So because the brain is really a very sensitive and important organ. So every effort must be done in order to protect this very important organ. So the skull offer that high level of protection to the sensitive brain, of course. Alright, so here we have features of a synovial joint. So the next type of joint category is synovial joint. So we just look at fixed joint, and again in the skull, that's where you would find example of a fixed joint. So let's look at synovial joints. And as for synovial joint, the main difference between the synovial joints and the one we just look at, which of course is fixed joint, is that synovial joint, these joints, they are known as freely movable joints. That means that they allow movement to take place, while as for fixed joint definitely don't allow any movement. So all have the same basic structure. So the fact that all of them have the same basic structures, I mean, that definitely mean that there is some similarity in terms of their function, and that similarity is basically the fact that the joints can move in different direction. The ligaments hold the bones firmly together, so anywhere you have a joint being formed, it is ligaments that actually keep them together. Right, so ligament literally keep them together. The surfaces of bones are covered in cartilage. Right, so what is cartilage? Now, cartilage is actually one of the tissue of the human skeletal system, and definitely it offers some amount of protection. It reduces what is known as friction. As once you're having movement taking place at the bone or at a joint, then they basically moving, and that movement between different parts definitely can cause a permanent. So the cartilage are very smooth to reduce friction and absorb shock. So that last point of there give you an idea as to the function of cartilage. So the shock they are talking about in terms of absorbing, it can be just simply you walking, because whenever you're walking, unless for example a lot of movement is taking place. So the fact that you're walking would mean that your knee joint, your ankle joint, those two joints, they are under a lot of pressure. Um, in terms of absorbing shock, the vibration, whenever you make a bigger long step, then the cartilage absorbs some of that shock. That simply means that the knee does not bear all of the weight. So it is very important. Cartilage is very important as a skeleton system tissue. And in terms of reducing the friction, again, once you have two different circles, once you have two different objects rubbing against each other, then definitely there is an increase of definitely what is known as friction. So the fact that cartilage, the fact that they are slippery, simply mean that they actually will reduce the friction there. Alright, so these point along there are saying that the synovial membrane produces the synovial fluid, and the synovial fluid is very important because the synovial fluid also help to lubricate. Okay, well, it is being recorded, so I'm gonna share the YouTube link so you can watch it in a one time. It is being recorded. Yes, no problem. Right, so as for the synovial membrane, it produces that fluid that is called the synovial fluid. Now, with this synovial fluid and the involvement of cartilage, now that is definitely how the friction is actually reduced or prevented at a joint. Alright, so as for the kinds of synovial joints, I mean, there are several different kinds of synovial joint. Ball and socket, that's the first one you're seeing there. So ball and socket found in the hip and yeah, yes, no problem. So found in the hip and shoulder, allows movement in all planes, universal movement. So in terms of the ball and socket joint, two places in the human body where you can find ball and socket joint, definitely in the hip region there and in the socket. As for the direction in which it allow movement, they are saying that it allows movement in all direction. And that is simply because of how the ball and socket joint is designed. Meaning that as for the ball and socket joint, there is a ball, and so the end of the humerus is what shaped like a ball, and then in a next bone that is called a scapula, that is what shaped like a socket. So that's why it actually get the name ball and socket joint. So the fact that it actually one end of one of the bones shaped like a ball, then basically it can rotate. So just like how a ball can roll, that's definitely how it allow movement in all direction. All right, so here we have an example of the ball and socket joint. So the shoulder joint. So the shoulder joint, for example, perfect example. Just bring it right. So the shoulder joint there is a perfect example of the ball and socket joint, meaning that it will allow the movement in all different directions. So the round end is one part of the humerus, or the top end of the humerus, and it is fit exactly in a section that shaped like a socket in the shoulder bone, or what we call the shoulder plate, or if you want to say the scapula. So the bring up back the PowerPoint for you. Right, so the third point along is saying that the fitting of the humerus into the cavity of the scapula, and that of course is the shoulder plate, basically allows you to swing your arm right around. So if you realize in terms of your arm at the shoulder section there, you can actually swing it right around in a circle. Swing it, allow movement in all different directions. Alright, so moving on to our next type of joint. This one is called the hinge joints. So allow movements in one plane. So it open and close like a door. And in terms of the angle, it can open as much as approximately 180 degrees, which would represent a straight line. So we have some joints in the human body, just like how you would open and close a door. That's how those joints operate, and this one is known as the hinge joint. So examples in terms of places on the human body where you can find this type of joint. For example, the joint at the elbow, that is a perfect example of a hinge joint. Joint at the knee, another example of a hinge joint, because if you realize, if you look at the movement, actually allow movement in only one direction, like basically open and close, just like how you would open and close a door. Then we have a next type of joint that is called the gliding joint, also known as sliding joint. Now, these joints allow bones to glide over each other, giving flexibility in the area. Allows several angles of movement are found where there are several small bones. So in the wrist region there of the hand, that's a perfect example where you have a gliding or sliding joint. So the bones within that area of the hand, in terms of them moving the basically slide across each other. So that's why, so the fact that they slide across each other, that is why it would have get the name that is known as gliding, because gliding mean sliding. Pivot, that's an type of joint, and one bone stays stationary, so that means that it don't move while the other rotates on it. Example at the neck and head. So you will realize that at the neck region here, you can basically do a simple rotation movement where you can move your head right across from side to side, and that is basically simple because I mean that's how it is situated. Actually, is working a pivot movement. Right, so and that should complete it in terms of joints. So again, first thing that you should be able to do is to define joints, tell what is a joint. And a joint is basically formed whenever you have two or more different bones meeting. Yes, yes, I will send it. So in the human body we have different types. So the two main categories are, of course, you have fixed and then we have synovial joints. So as for the fixed joint again, you will actually find fixed joint in the skull, and the name of it is known as the sutures. So fixed means that no movement happen within this joint. That's why it is called a fixed joint. So no movement take place. And after looking at fixed joint, the next category would be synovial joints. So definitely we have different types of synovial joints, and of course the different types are the ball and socket, and then you have the hinge, then of course you have the gliding joint and the pivot joint.